All right. Well, if you've been here before, you know the format. So it's about 45 minutes. So we'll do a 30-minute Q&A. I'll ask Bolanle some questions. And then towards the end of the call, we'll do an open floor Q&A. If you have questions while we're chatting, feel free to come off of mute, raise your hand, and let us know if you have a question. And we'll pause to get anything answered while we're having the conversation. But I'm so, so excited for this one. I told Bolanle because she's been with me throughout the entire real estate journey. And I think this conversation is something that I wish I had because I have so many questions. There's so much about trying to buy a house that we just don't understand. It's just all so confusing. There's so much information out there. So I'm very, very, very excited for this conversation. So just a quick intro for anyone that's joining for the first time. My name is Bolanle Ogunmakin. I am the founder of AfroKlash. And so this is our monthly elevation series where we have someone come on from a different industry to talk about a different topic in their area of expertise. So this conversation is everything real estate. So if you're trying to buy a house, you already have a house, you're trying to invest, you're trying to become a realtor, Bolanle has seen it all, and so she can get to those questions today. So Bolanle, I'll let you do a quick intro, and then we'll get into some questions for you.
All right. My name is Bolanle, as Bosola mentioned. Whenever someone asks this, I'm always like, what am I supposed to say? Okay. Born in Nigeria. Born in Nigeria, moved here around the age of 10. My family moved to the Maryland area, grew up around there, went to college in Frederick, Maryland, went to grad school, started working, and I bought an apartment building. So
Yes,
that kind of started the journey.
I
So
know.
yeah.
That's like, I wanted to start there because I still remember, um, like, because you were so young. Because anyone else, I think most of us, if you're trying to get into real estate, the first thing you do is maybe buy a townhouse, a single family, a condo. I don't really know anyone for their first thing they venture into a 4-unit home. So, what was the reason behind that? Like, why did you decide to go that route versus just getting one individual home for yourself?
So it all started when I graduated from grad school. And my first job was actually working in DC with
Mm.
the homeless population. So I was living at home, working in DC with the homeless population, and a lot of our clients, we were trying to get them rehoused and get them into housing. So a lot of the times they don't exactly fit into being the perfect client for like bigger apartment buildings. So there were smaller landlords that we could talk to and negotiate with and say, hey, we're going to provide this, we're going to provide our client with support services. They're going to be great landlord. We're going to pay the rent. Everything's going to be fine. So when we started talking to those landlords, that's when I learned that a lot of these landlords, they're very small landlords. They only had like 4 units or a duplex, just 2 units. Some of them have 5 units. So not like the bigger 25 unit to
Mhm.
kind of,
Mhm.
but they still serve their need because since they're like small
Yeah.
mom and pop shop, you can still negotiate and get our clients what they need. And the landlord still makes money because now they have a program that's able to pay their pay our clients rent. So that's when I was like,
Mhm.
get a 4 unit, I can become one of these landlords,
All right.
and rent it out and have people pay me while I live there. So I
Yeah.
started doing some research. First thing I did, went online, started researching about it, spoke to the landlords a lot, said, hey, how did you get your first property?
Mhm.
Is it worth it? How is it going? What are some of like the things that you've encountered? So I spoke to them a lot about how they got started, and I started doing more research on it. And from then I found out you can actually buy a 4 unit as if you're buying a regular single family home. So
Wow.
the requirements are the same when you're buying a single family home or a town home, up to 4 units. So I'm saying, well, I'm gonna go up to 4 units. It's
Yeah.
like it's the same process, so why not? So
Mhm.
that's
Smart.
I got started.
Yeah, so let's start there where you say research the process. It's pretty much the same. So if I'm coming to you as a first-time homeowner, haven't started anything. I just say I want to buy a house. Where do I begin? What do I need to have? Where do I start? So I'm coming to you as a first-time homeowner. How do you start like talking me through the process? What's the first couple of things I need to do?
So the biggest thing is definitely finances. That's a big being financially ready is the first step in look when you're looking to purchase a home. So it means that you have savings for down payment, or someone that has some money to give you. Like, it could be a parent, it could be whoever, but you have down payment, which is typically about 5 to 20%. With certain programs, it could be all the way down to 3.5. Certain programs is even 0% down payment. So those ones are, we'll talk about that a little later too, but making sure that you have a down payment, a good credit score. I think we all know that credit runs the United
Yeah.
States. So
Yeah.
having a great credit score, it really, it helps. You can get a mortgage with, an average credit score, of course, but the interest rate on your mortgage really depends on how great your credit is. So making sure that, you've cleared anything on your credit that needs to be cleared, and being like ready credit wise. Stable income, obviously the lenders are going to be looking at your income to make sure that you can actually repay the mortgage, because who wants to lend to someone that might not be able to repay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then just the budget for closing costs. These are the costs that people don't really know about, but usually
Yes.
typically saving about 3 to maybe 5% if you want to be really sure, like 10% also saving that aside for the closing costs. So financial readiness, understanding the housing market, where do you want to live? What are property values there? What kind of trend? Is it like a neighborhood that's trending upwards? Is it going downwards?
Mm-hmm.
So looking at the amenities, the schools, transportation, do they have any future development plans? Because even if you're just buying a single family home, it's a big, big investment. It's usually
Yes.
people's biggest investments. So
Mm-hmm.
you still want to make sure that you're doing the research to make sure that your investment is going to be secure in the future, that you're still going to be making money in the future, if and when you do sell. Uh,
Yeah.
so once you understand the housing market, then you go for the pre-approval, where you go to a lender and get a pre-approval. So that would determine how much you can actually how much you can afford, because you don't want to start looking at properties and you find out like,
Right.
oh, I can't afford this. And then after that, you just find the right property, you know, meet up with a real estate agent if you're going that route. Start looking at properties, the fun part, I usually say, the fun part, getting to look at different homes. And then after that, put in a contract on a home, doing your due diligence, doing inspections, reviewing the disclosures of the property, understanding the terms of you're going to sign a lot of paper. So understanding the
Yeah.
terms of the agreement is going to be a big deal. And then just moving and transitioning.
So I want to pull out a couple of things from that. So first, like, what is considered a good credit score?
Oh man, it's all the time. So I believe you can get a mortgage. Maybe 580 could get you a mortgage, but
Okay.
the interest rates are going to be very, very high. I
Yes.
personally like 700s. If you
Mm,
get 700s, you're good. Not to say you can't get a mortgage under 700. You can.
hmm.
Once again, the interest rate is going to kill you. Uh,
Yeah.
so just making sure that you're working towards getting your credit into that 700, 750 range. I think when I first started, it was in the 700s, upper 700s.
Okay. And so if I don't, to your point, if I don't have a good credit score and I'm trying to buy a house in November of this year, how can I start working now between now and November to get my credit score higher?
We'll find out what your credit score is, first of all. If you already know that, that's great. That's half the battle. Is finding out your credit score, looking at what's on there to make sure that, first of all, like they're accurate, because you can be like, "Wait a
Mhm.
minute, I paid this already. Why still on here? They never took it
Yeah.
off." Call up that company and say, "Hey, you never took it off my credit." Um, a lot of people in the early 20s age, what they'll find is maybe they don't even have enough credit, because that could also be a thing, is not even having any credit at all. Because a lot of times maybe we just got out of college. The only thing is probably on like the student loan is probably the only thing on there. If you bought a car, that could be on there and everything. So even just making sure you have credit, it's a
Mhm.
big deal. I know for me, I was very aware of the role that credit plays in my future. So when I was in college, I did get a credit card, but it's one of those secured credit card, very low limit, making sure that I pay it off at the end of the month. So just to build my credit. So I
Mhm.
knew it was just to build my credit. It wasn't like to splurge or anything
Right.
like that. So the occasional Chinese food while studying, I'm paying it off right away. So there's no interest, because you don't want to pay
Yeah.
on food that you ate already.
Right.
So making sure that you're building your credit as little as possible. Don't go crazy, of course, because you still have to pay this money back. It's not free money, but
Exactly.
yeah, making sure that you're using it and paying it off at the end of the month. If your credit is already messed up, just making sure that you clear that. Meaning, like, you're calling up companies, setting up a payment plan. A lot of times they send it to collections, and you can negotiate with collections agency and say, hey, assuming you owe like $100, and you can say, hey, I can pay you 50 today, and you can we make a deal and you take it off? I pay you 50 today versus you waiting for
Mhm.
100 and you may never get it. So a lot of
Right.
times you're willing to negotiate to just get some money versus no money. So you
Yeah.
can go ahead and start contacting them and get that off. But yeah, I know Credit Karma and some other places have ways
Yeah.
that like this is, if you look online, there's a lot of ways they would tell you like how to clean up your credit.
Yes. And Simi had a question in the chat. What's the best site to check your credit score? I know personally, like you said, I used Credit Karma.
Yeah.
Was the easiest one and the main one that I use. But if anyone else has other suggestions or options, feel free to drop them in the chat.
Credit Karma is a big one, but want everybody to remember that
Yeah.
each credit company or whatever they're called, they you're allowed one free one a year.
Yeah.
So if you're really serious about getting a home, you want to order one from each of them. So you want to order one from Experian, TransUnion, for whatever reason, I forgot the last one right now.
Fax is it?
Equifax, yes, Equifax. So you order one from each of them and make sure you compare, because you do want to see maybe TransUnion has something that Experian doesn't. So make sure you order for about 3 of them and then take a look at it. So you could do Credit Karma. You could also go deeper and just order it directly from them to make sure that it's accurate and whatever it is you need to do.
Okay. And then something else you talked about. So one of the first things I remember when I told you I was ready to buy, you said, okay, what is your budget? Have you gotten a pre-approval? Like you said, most realtors don't even talk to you until
Yes.
you have a pre-approval. So can you explain a little bit more about what that is, why it's so important to have that?
Yes. So a pre-approval, and even a pre-qualification could work. Pre-qualification is when you've gone to a lender and you said, I want to buy a house, and they say, okay, tell me your income, tell me, they ask for many different things that they want to know, so they can kind of say, okay, based on all these factors, tell me like what your credit score, based on all these factors, this is an amount that you could qualify for. A pre-approval goes a step further where they verify that. So with pre-approval, you sent them your pay stubs. With a pre-approval, they've ran your actual credit to know what your credit is. With a pre-approval, they've been able to look at you as a whole and say, okay, this is how much we're willing to let you borrow. So a pre-approval is just, you know exactly like, okay, I can only borrow 500. This is what they're offering me. So I need to get something below $500,000. So pre-qualification is also great because you kind of get an idea of what your range could be, but with a pre-approval, you know exactly, like they're giving these letters and say, hey, if you find a house, we're willing to lend you this amount of money to pay for it.
Yeah. And as you know, like you've been telling me to buy a house for I don't know how many years, maybe 10 years before I finally bought a house.
Gently.
Yeah, right, gently. But I think like most people, right, it's just so intimidating. You know, do I have enough money? Do I want to invest in this city? Do I want to stay here for a long period of time? So there's just so many concerns that go into it. But I think one of the things that I learned afterwards is not like you said, it's not even just the down payment that you need to save for. There's so many other costs that come with owning a house that it almost feels like once you're in the process, like, oh, you have this cost and you have this cost and you have this cost, and you're trying to wrap your head around it. So can you talk about the other costs that you know that are associated with buying a house outside of saving for the closing costs or the down payments?
Okay, so even just the closing cost is really important to know what goes into this too, just so you can be prepared. So there's like the loan origination fee because the lender is going to make some money for originating that loan. There's the appraisal fee because they have to send someone out to go make sure that the property that you're buying is worth the amount that you're looking to pay for it. There's title insurance, there's escrow, there's attorney fees, there's recording fee to record it with the county or city that you're in. Usually you pay a home inspection fee too. So don't forget the home inspection fee because usually that comes straight out of your pocket. There's property taxes. A lot of people kind of gloss over that because I've seen people take a look at a house and say, hey, I can afford this house. And then they take a look at the property tax because you have to remember that also gets divided up each month into your mortgage. So you have to make sure that you can afford whatever that property tax of that area is. You need insurance. You have to have insurance on your home at all times. So you have to factor that in, the homeowner's insurance. That's something that you can shop for, obviously. But homeowner's insurance is also a cost that most people might not know about. And then if you're paying less than 20% of the purchase price, sometimes the lender will require you to have private mortgage insurance or a mortgage insurance premium. mortgage insurance premium is like with the federal program, the FHA program, but and private mortgage insurance PMI is usually like with conventional loans and other type of loans, but that also gets added to your mortgage payment. So you're looking at the actual purchase price when you're doing the mortgage, you're looking at the property tax, and you're looking at the home insurance and any kind of private mortgage insurance.
Yeah.
Other things, HOA, if your homeowners association, if your home is in a homeowners association, meaning that there's a group, a board that makes sure that the common area is maintained. There's different kind of agreements in a HOA.
Mhm.
Basically, it governs how that community is going to be in terms of like maintenance and in terms of like what you can and can't do. So there's usually a HOA fee to run that HOA. And then there's also just like utilities. You have to remember, like you're moving into a home, you're gonna need, you're gonna need utilities. You're gonna need
Yeah.
electricity. You're gonna need gas. So you have to remember to factor that into your budget. Also, moving expenses. A lot of people don't think about it, but if you unless
Furniture.
yeah, you have to move. You have to if you're hiring movers, factor that in because it could cost a couple of thousands depending on where you're moving from and where you're moving to.
Yeah.
Moving truck, even if you're doing it yourself, a moving truck. You got to pack. You got to give your friends pizza if they help you out. That kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
if you do need temporary storage, you have to think about all those kind of things
Yes.
before you also move. And then if there's any renovations or repairs, so maybe you found a house and you're like, oh, I don't really like the kitchen. I want to renovate it before I move in, or I want to renovate it eventually. You should factor those kind of costs into it also.
Yes. No, and that is so good. And this is not to intimidate anyone because I think
Oh,
hearing all of those, coming out, but like they're all increments. Some of them are not very high. Some of them are in the hundreds, 150, 200. But I think just all that to say is, just make sure you're saving up over time. Um,
mhm.
and not just think of the one, down, I'm just going to put this 20% or 3% or 5% down payment. There's so many other costs. So make sure you just have a buffer to prepare yourself for that purchase. All right. Miriam said, are there additional factors loan companies look for and fees to consider if someone's goal is to purchase investment property? So I'm going to put a pin in that question really quickly because we are going to get to investment properties in a second. So Miriam, will come back to your question.
Okay.
Um,
Just to add to what you're saying too, you don't want to be house poor. Is exactly what you're
House
saying.
tour, yes,
A house
exactly.
poor. You don't want to buy a house and then realize I have zero money left. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, well, you have a house now. You're house poor, and
Yeah.
you might have to like live month to month for a couple of months before you get your savings back up. So making sure that your
Yes.
savings can cover anything that could come up during that period.
That was a very big one for me, because, I think for most of us, right, everyone, you have to think about the lifestyle that you have and the things that are important to you, whether it's this gym you go to, whether you like to travel, and are you still going to be able to do those things after you purchase this house? So it's really doing a deep dive in your finances because I was scared of looking at my finances and I just, I was just living YOLO and swiping this and swiping that. But when you're buying, you really just have to really do the calculations and say, can I still go to this gym? Am I going to have to do Planet Fitness instead for the next couple of months? Or am I going to have to stop traveling for a while? Or if I want to keep doing those things, what kind of house can I afford? If I can't afford the 500,000 house to maintain my lifestyle, maybe I get the cheaper house in a better neighborhood, etc. So just all of those kind of factors to think about. And something that we'd also talked about was the consideration of buying new versus used. I feel like there's pros and cons to both, but I wanted to get your perspective and I can share mine as well. Because I think that comes up a lot. Should I buy a new home that might take longer to build in this neighborhood? Or should I buy a used home that is ready now because I'm ready? My rent is coming up. So I just want to move into a house quicker. So what is your expertise or your perspective on should I buy a brand new home or is it okay to go with a used home?
So it's going to differ because I tend to always look at things from an investment perspective.
Yeah.
So if you're buying the older home, you tend to the equity might be a lot more than if you're buying a new home. With the older home, you can probably get it for cheaper and you're able to renovate it and you're able to bring up the value. And even if like it's not an investment property, you can take out that equity in a HELOC, in a home equity line of credit. So you can actually make money while still living there. You can use that to maybe invest in another property, or invest in something else, and gain more money. So for me, my preference
Yeah.
usually is to. I know, but so it's like you're crazy, you're crazy. But my preference is always is usually to buy older homes and renovate and bring it up to the standard that the neighborhood is going for, and to
Yeah.
to capture that equity. Some people prefer new because like if you're looking at it from just I'm gonna be a new homeowner, I don't want any stress. There's still a little bit of stress that goes with new, but it's a lot less stressful than if you were to renovate, because when renovating, you don't know what's gonna come up. You can open up the walls and it's like all the framing is like rotten and the house is about to fall down.
Yeah.
There's so many things that can happen when you're buying an older home because it's older. So there's
Mm.
gonna be like some wear and tear. If the person there's people that have been living there over the years, they don't really take care of it, you might find a lot of things wrong structurally. But
Yeah.
I'm always advising people like look at the structure very, very well before you buy a older home. But what's the
Yeah.
liability? You have to.
Yeah, and I will ask that, and I will say I think it also depends on your personality and the type of person that you are. Like for me, I'm not a DIY person. I just want it to be fresh and shiny. Come in and I put my
Yeah.
stuff and I'm sitting down, everything is set. So it depends. Like I have a friend, she's very creative. Bolanle, you're the same, like very creative, like to really get into the weeds of things, build something from the ground up. So if you're, you do save so much, it's quicker, you get a lot of value when you get a used home. So I think those are just look at yourself and really understand, like don't go on Instagram because you see people saying, oh, this was a house and it was trash and look at how I
Just
built
when it
something
snap and then everything
and it's
just
snap
straight.
and it's pretty, and then you think you can get a used home. So there's so much that goes into it. So I think you just really have to look at yourself and say, what kind of person am I and what can I handle? Because both sides, like Bonnie said, there's a lot of stress, but what levels of stress am I willing to undertake? So I think that's something to think about as well. So I think the main thing, like we're talking about buying a house, but I think as everyone probably knows on this call right now, the interest rates are high. I mean, it's pretty standard for what we had a couple of years ago. I think we're all thinking about 2021, which was 2%, which is the outlier. It's probably never ever going to happen again. But we're all coming. My sister's on this call, and I'm still so upset with her because she got her house in 2021 for like 2 point
Did.
something percent, which
Yes.
I'm so jealous of. So they're the blessed people, and we're never gonna see that rate again. But I think people are coming from that lens, and so there's something that people say around, is it, I think, date the rates and marry the house or something like that. So can you kind of talk through, is this a good time to buy with how high the interest rates are? Should I buy a house now? Should I wait for the rates to come down? What is your usual opinion on that?
People hate this answer, but it really just depends, right? It really
Yeah.
depends.
Yes.
For me, I'm always gonna buy homes. Like no matter what's going on, always gonna buy homes and look into because like you just said, date the rate and marry the home kind of thing. You can always, when the rates go down, you can always refinance. Is
Mhm.
refinancing the easiest thing? Do you snap your finger and it happens? No. But it's still a lot easier than starting all over from scratch. But you can always refinance the rates, but it really just depends once again on your comfortability level, your pockets. If you can still afford the home at the rate that is going for right now, and the thing is like, even when the rates come down, the home prices might still be higher. So you really just have to like say, okay, am I able to negotiate better because of this higher interest rate? Or sellers are more willing to do some things now to counteract that interest rate versus like just having a property sit on the market. I know some sellers that are paying points for buyers so that they can get a lower interest rate. Buyers are paying their own points down so that they can get a lower interest rate.
I get
So
that.
just it depends on your pockets. It depends on just your mindset. Like, what is the mindset? What's more important? Like getting that property and building that equity, knowing that in a couple of years it's going to be worth way more than you bought it for, no matter what the interest rate is, or is it going to be like I'm going to be in a hole for a couple
Mhm.
of years if I buy at this interest rate?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. And one of the last things I wanted to talk about around buying for the first time is using a realtor, finding a realtor. What is your perspective on, do you need a realtor? And if so, how should people go about picking a realtor, finding the proper realtor to work with? Because I think, there's so many realtors out there, there's so many on social media, friends of a friend. So the first question is, do you think a realtor is necessary? And if someone really wants to work with a realtor, because I was in that case, I didn't want to do it on my own, how to find a good realtor.
Legally, you don't have to have a realtor, but would I recommend it? It depends. If you're already a lawyer, you know how to read stuff, you know how to negotiate. Maybe you don't need a realtor. But for a lot of people, when I bought my first property, I went through an agent. because I didn't know anything really. I read some stuff, but really I still didn't have much experience. So I needed a realtor to guide me. And a lot of times, especially if like you're newer in the area, you might not know where to buy. I mean, realtors they have that local knowledge of like, oh yeah, you want to stay from this area. Even though the area might look great online, you're like, this house looks great. The realtor might say, depending on what your comfortability level is, like maybe you want to look in this area. So they have a lot of
Oh,
a lot of local wisdom, local knowledge. They have a lot of resources. They can say, hey, I know mine connected me with a bunch of like different mortgage lenders and like property managers and contractors. So a lot of times they have resources too that they can provide to you. But once again, it depends on how comfortable you feel. Like sometimes a lot of people now just like maybe getting lawyers to take a look at all the legal stuff. Uh, but um, you still have to get into the properties too. So if you're representing yourself, you're gonna have to be contacting sellers, agents. They're upset because they're like, well, I have to show you a property. What do you
yeah.
okay? Then I have to get
Yeah.
up. You don't have an agent after they
Hmm.
you like so it really just it really once again, unfortunately, it depends. But do I
Depends.
recommend them? I do until maybe you get to a level where you're comfortable enough to be able to represent yourself. I mean, the last
Yeah.
couple of deals that I had, I didn't really have to get an agent to do it. But if you're newer, I would
Hmm.
at least like you get that kind of guidance from them and the wisdom from them. So that maybe if your plan is to do it for yourself later in the future, then you can at least ask them a lot of questions and like be really involved in the process so you know exactly how to do it yourself if you go that route.
Yeah, and that's what I'll add as well is for me, what was most important, especially as a first-time home buyer, was going with someone that I didn't feel uncomfortable calling
Mm.
all of the time with my questions. So if you feel like you're not comfortable with the person or they're acting upset that you're asking questions or they're getting frustrated by your questions, they're just not the person to go
Yes.
with because you will have questions. So you don't want to go with someone that's going to make you feel like you're
Yeah.
bothering them or you're asking too many questions. I think for me, that was the number one criteria, the level of comfortability with the person. But I agree. If you're in a new area, in a new city that you don't know, it's good to have that insight because they also know they have those contacts, they have all of those things that you don't have access to. So I think they're helpful in that sense. All right. And Simi said, how do you know how to find the first time home buyer offers and deals for your state? So those, I know you always talked about that. Like there's grants available where sometimes they can even waive your entire down payment and things like that. So how can people find those kind of grants if they're trying to buy for the first time?
The easiest way is just to go to the city or the county's website. Usually they would have like a section for like home buyers. I mean, a Google search will pull this up also. If you just type in like, the city of Laurel first time home buyers program, that should be able to pop up. Once again, it's something you can ask an agent also. Hey, any first time home buyers program that you know of that are not out there, maybe some are in the pipeline that everybody doesn't know about just yet. Are there any banks that are offering programs that will help you with down payment? So those are the things that you can ask. I know in the my beginnings, I went to a lot of like real estate meetups. So talking to those people and finding out like how they did it, if they use first time home buyers program. Sometimes there'd be seminars on first time home buyers program on there. The one I used in DC Open Doors, I believe it was I'm not sure if I found it online, if my agent told me about it, but that was the one I used in DC at the time, DC
If
Open
you open
Doors.
doors, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but just doing a quick Google search or talking to agents in that area or Bigger Pockets. Bigger Pockets is amazing as if you want to be an investor. Bigger Pockets is like it's the largest investor forum in the world actually. So getting on there and like typing in first time home buyers program, a lot of people in the different cities that you're interested in should be talking about it because that's a great way to be creative with your finances
Mhm.
when you're looking to buy.
Yeah. Okay, so pivoting now to like someone that has their first home is looking to invest, like so like you become a serial real estate investor, get into house hacking, making passive income through purchasing a house. How does that differ? So, what kind of down payment do I need? How does the process differ from that of a first-time home buyer if I'm getting my second or third home?
Uh, Great question. So as I mentioned before, when I said the process is like literally the same, if you are that first time home buyer, um, the down payment is what I'm really talking about. Like you still qualify if you're getting a FHA loan, which is backed by the federal government, you still qualify for that 3.5% down. The same way if someone else is buying a single family home or a townhome, that 3.5 you still get. So now you're buying a 4-unit, you're only paying 3.5% down on the down payment. And you get to rent out the other 3 units. So in that case, like, it's beautiful. And there is the occupancy requirement, obviously, but it's only for a year. So you buy that FHA 3.5% down home. Maybe you get a first-time home buyer, like I did. I got a first-time home buyer program. I paid 0% down, really. At the end of closing, I actually got some money, which is always the
Yeah.
only time so far I've gotten money when I was walking off the table, because of like some repairs and everything. But in that case, if you're saying my first home is going to be a rental property because I only have to be there for a year. If you're really crazy, you could do it every year for a couple of years until you get tired. And imagine, like, if you're buying a 4-unit every year for the next 5 years, that's 20 units that you have.
So say like me, let me use me and myself as an example, right? My first one, I have the townhouse, and now I want to get a duplex as my second investment property. I only have to put down 3%,
No. So
right? Right.
so if you're not going to be living there, because the whole thing, they really encourage home ownership, because they
Yeah.
found that for most people, when you own your home, you'll do better at like maintaining the neighborhood and maintaining it.
Mhm.
So a lot of this programs, down payments are geared more towards home buyers. So as an investor, you have to have a little more skin in the game. When lenders are giving you money as an investor, there's a bigger risk. So they
Right.
need you to have skin in the game. So usually, I usually budget about 25% down.
Right.
I've seen some 20% down, 15% down, but usually you're not getting below like a 15% down for investment home. There is like a hack you could do if you can buy something as a second home, and that's 10%. So if it's going to be in a different state,
Mhm.
if it's be more than 50 miles away from where you are, you can actually purchase it as a second home with 10% down.
So what is the difference between the second home, or what makes it a second
You're
home versus a second investment property? Because you're not living there. So why isn't it 25%?
Technically, you're supposed to live there maybe for half the year. So,
I
so for
see.
example, maybe you work. So my sister actually lives closer to Atlanta, but she works in like Macon, Georgia. So she could put 10% down to buy a second home in Macon because she works there. And maybe some
Mm,
sleep there.
mm,
She's gonna sleep there. So
got it.
that's the case because her home is so far away from her job. She can get a second home where her job is located. Uh,
Got
yeah, I know for me, the only time I've used it, I lived in Maryland, was looking to eventually move to Georgia. And I'm like, well, I have a lot of family members in Georgia and I visit a lot. So I want a second home in Georgia. And I was able to
Mhm.
get 10% down for that versus like the 20% since I already had a primary home.
Someone just said that as well. So buying my second home with 5% down by stating it as my primary residence. Smart. I didn't even know you could do that. Okay, so I want to bring back Miriam's question. She said, are there additional factors loan companies look for and fees to consider if someone's goal is to purchase investment property? So outside of the fees and factors that we've talked about, is there anything unique, like them knowing that it's an investment property? Do they look at anything differently as far as your finances or fees?
Um, in terms of finances, I mean, you still have to be able to afford the property. What's actually really cool about investment properties is that you can use, and that's really how, because I was actually technically poor when I lived in DC. I was making $40,000 or $45,000 a year, and you know that area, the income is very much higher than that. So I was technically
Mhm.
poor. So what you can actually do, what my agent, and that's why thank God I had an agent that was also an investor. They can look at how much money you're supposed to get from the rent and add it to your income, because technically
Mm,
that's income for you. So if I'm buying a 4-unit building and I'm renting out the other three units for $1,000 each, that $3,000 extra a month is added to my income.
mhm.
But I'm not going to qualify for a higher mortgage because it's like, well, we're expecting you to get that. So it's a little different in that they can say, okay, we can add what you are going to be making from those units into your income to give you like a higher income so you can be able to afford a little bit more. Because technically, you're not supposed to be the only one paying for that mortgage. It's supposed to be from the rent and everything. So those are kind
Right.
of some additional factor that's super helpful when you're doing that. Is there any other
Yeah,
fee?
someone said, but sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And but going the FHA route, does it lock you into a higher PMI with the FHA?
If you're paying less than 20%, you get a PMI. I don't know that if the PMI, I don't know that the PMIs are higher or lower or anything like that, but you get a PMI. Whatever that PMI rate is what you're going to be paying. But because yes, it'll be 3.5% down or 5% or whatever it is, you will have to pay a PMI until I think you get to like about 80% of that loan. Then you can ask them to take off the PMI.
Okay. All right. So if there's any other questions, feel free to put it in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, just raise your hand and you can ask your question. Or if you need additional detail about something Bolanle said and you want to have a conversation about it, just raise your hand and we will take you off mute if you don't have any questions. Another thing I wanted to ask as well while we're waiting for anyone to come off with questions is if I wanted to become a realtor, what is the process for that?
You would have to take classes, take some realtor classes, some real estate agent classes, because there's a lot of rules, there's a lot of regulation, there's a lot of ethics things that you have to learn in order to become an agent. So take classes, find a broker, because you have to be under someone that's managing you. And because since there's so many rules, it can be so easy to break a rule. Because you're not really, the way you advise your client, you're not really supposed to steer them away from a certain neighborhood, because that's super illegal. That's what used to happen back in the day, where a lot of like the agents will steer Black people away from white neighborhoods and those kind of, so there's a lot of different legal things that goes on. So you need someone to kind of guide you in that sense. So you take the classes, find a broker, someone that you can someone that will mentor you, like you guys know about the Keller Williams and the Remax and all the bigger companies. But you can also go, I went with for my first one, I went with a very small local boutique agency, just because like I needed more one-on-one time with the owner. So you can find like a local boutique agency with that. So find that and then start learning, start getting clients. And
Nice. I don't know if you saw someone just asked a question. So Bolanle and I were actually talking about this because I saw this article on New York Times about the change. I know about the change in realtor compensation and all the legal things going around that. So for anyone that doesn't know, typically when you buy a house, your realtor's commission comes from the seller, and I think typically right now it's at 6%, I believe. But there's conversations going on that potentially that could then shift to the buyer, where the buyer would have to pay the realtor, and I think there's conversation around that commission coming down because they feel like it's too high and realtors are not really earning that commission. So Shabelle and I are talking about this, still up in the air, we don't know where it's going to land. But so the question was, how do you see the new ruling around how realtors are compensated changing the home buying landscape, and how should buyers be thinking through that?
Yeah, that's been a big thing that's been like, it's been going crazy. People have been contacting me like, are you going to be affected? And I'm like, well, I'm not really selling right now, so not yet. But and there's still a lot that needs to be figured out after this ruling anyway. But yeah, the general idea is that now maybe sellers won't be kind of pressured into paying that 6%, because as a seller, like that is a lot that comes out of your pocket. And sometimes you're like, why am I paying for the buyer's agent? I'm already paying my agent, I have to pay for the buyer's agent. So, the way that I see it changing, a lot of people are discussing like maybe because the buyers too, a lot of buyers might not. So first of all, it's possible that the percentage will go down because it's going to be a lot more conversation now. I know like there's certain buyer agents that, because a lot of it's between 5% and 6%. 6% is the usual, but in some areas it's like 5%. But I know some agents that would say, I know one in particular that's like, I make 3%, no matter who pays it. I don't care who pays it. I'm making 3% off this. So even if the seller had offered 2.5%, they're going to require their buyer to pay that 0.5 that's left. So I think now there's going to be more conversation of like, okay, and a lot more negotiation of like, okay, can I only pay 2%? People were talking about like maybe a flat fee structure where maybe they do their own showings and the agent is just there to look at forms. So there might be like a more of a transactional flat fee kind of rate. So it really could go in any way at this point. But in terms of like changing the landscape, I don't know what's going to happen just yet. But it does. I think it works. It probably works really good for the seller. And I think what they're hoping is that with that, the home prices will come down, because a lot of times the seller have baked that price, they've baked that fee into it anyway. So sometimes they sell a house for, they're going to try to sell a house for a little bit more knowing that
They
they
have
have
to pay
to pay
that.
6%. So what they're hoping is like, if sellers only have to pay 3%, maybe that other 3%, they will knock it off the home
The house
prices.
price.
No one knows if that's going to happen just yet. But I think in terms of like buyers, it's going to affect buyers a little bit more now, and whether or not they can negotiate
Yeah.
those kind of rates.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very, very interesting. But I feel like there's no final decision, but I think it's going to come up a lot as people are trying to buy and talk to realtors. And now, because before I feel like you never even ask a realtor what's your rate, or
Right,
you just
because it
never had
doesn't
to
make
pay
sense.
it.
It
So it
doesn't
never
make
was part
sense.
of the conversation. But now I think now you're going to actually really be shopping for realtors. Is you already
Right.
have this person? What are you really going to offer me? And all of those things. So I think in that way, at least in the interim, that's going to be, I think, the biggest shift for now.
And it might weed out a lot of like realtors that are not very,
Yes.
like, might weed out a lot of like subpar realtors that don't go above
Yes.
and beyond, because they'll be like, oh, yeah,
Exactly.
I have to actually pay you. Okay, no.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
like
I
you
agree.
get paid anyway. Yeah.
100%. Okay, another question. I hear sometimes even if you have 20% to put down, sometimes putting the minimum of 3% is also okay because the difference is not that much in your monthly payment. From your experience, what do you recommend? I don't think I understand the question, but I think
I
you
think
do.
I understand that. So if you put 20% down, versus if you put 3% down, sometimes it doesn't make that much of a difference in your mortgage. Anyway,
Mhm,
maybe it
mhm.
makes a couple of hundred of dollars in your income. Maybe it's like $300, the difference in your income. So I think this person is asking, what do I recommend? I'm always going to come from an investor standpoint. I'm going to use whatever money I have to distribute as much as I can. So if I don't have to pay 20%, I'm not paying 20%. If I can pay 3% on all of my investment properties, I would love to. And the reason why is that even if I do have to pay that higher mortgage, I'm not paying that mortgage. My tenants are paying that mortgage because I'm making money. I'm making rent from that. So if I have $100,000 and and someone is asking me for 20% down on a particular property, but I can also just use 3%. So I can buy maybe 2 properties, or I can buy 5 properties if I'm putting 3% down instead. Because at the end of the day, what does it matter to how much the mortgage is to me? Because I've done my math and I've done my analysis and I know that the rent is going to be able to cover it anyway. I'd rather spread out whatever down payment that I have over the course of several properties
Right.
versus paying 20% for like
Well,
just that 1 or 2 versus like 3 or 4 or 5. So
yeah.
that's my personal recommendation. Once again, it's very different from everybody, for anybody. If you rather capture that 20% equity in the beginning, that's fine also.
Yeah. All right. And then for investment property, this is a good one as well. Do you have property managers for all of them? And then if so, what is your criteria for deciding if you need one for a property or not? And I think, because at first I remember you didn't have one and then you became a property manager.
I did not have a property manager in the beginning because I was living in that unit.
Yeah.
So I had to like kind of learn to be a landlord pretty quickly. Made a lot of mistakes. Got a lot of the wrong tenants. Had to do evictions. Had a squatter living there at some point. In the basement. So the question, do I have a property manager? Now I do. Initially, I used to do my own property management, and I found that I did not enjoy it. Because a lot of
Yeah.
times when tenants are reaching out, they're not saying, "Hi, how are you? Your property is so great." They're
Right.
because something is wrong. So
Yeah.
every time, whenever I used to see like a tenant calling or text message, my heart just starts to beat fast. Like, oh my God, how much is this phone call going to cost me? Do I have a handyman that's ready to go? So a lot of it for some people, the savings might be worth it. For me, it wasn't, because it was affecting my mental health so much. I was like, I can't do it. And the
Yeah.
great thing is, like, if you hire a property manager, you can recapture what you're paying them, the 10% or 8%. You can recapture that in your taxes anyway. So I'm like, it's a no-brainer for me. I'll let them handle the stress. And right now, like, because passive income should be passive, to me at least. If
Yeah.
you want it to
Yeah.
be active, of course you can do your own thing if you want it to be more active. But for me, I really want it passive. So right
Mm,
now, I just get money at the end of the month. If there's a big decision they need to make, they'll contact me. But otherwise, I'm not fielding phone calls from tenants. I'm not looking for the tenants. I'm just getting rent.
yeah. Another question is advice on buying down points for your rate versus just seeing what the market does. So I know for me, I bought down my rate just because I think for me the I was looking at the monthly cost if I didn't buy down, So I'd rather just put that for my savings that I had already put aside for the house, put that lump sum to buy down the rate. Then that way on a monthly basis, I'm not thinking of, am I going to be able to afford this every single month? So I bought it down for that reason. But what's your opinion on, should you buy down the rate versus just seeing what the market does?
I agree with you, especially if it's going to be your primary home. It might be worth it to buy down the rate because, like, you have your budget, like you've done your budget, you know where you're comfortable, and you want to stay that way. Because if you calculate how much you're going to be paying if you don't refinance over that course of
Right.
that mortgage, I mean, that's a lot of interest. So if
Mhm.
you're able to, I would always say buy down the points if you can afford to. If you can't afford to, don't worry about it too much. Refinance when you get a chance.
Okay. And then wanted to follow up on the prior question around how you were saying you can, with passive income, you can make that property management cost through tax later. She said, how do
Yes.
you capture that back? Is it by writing it off as a business expense?
That is correct. Yes. So it'll be part of the expenditures that goes towards your property. So when you're doing like the income versus the expenses for that property, the property management fee is included as part of the expenses. And so is your tax guy. My accountant is a business write-off also. Um,
Mm,
there's a lot of things that can be a business, and that's why a lot of people get into investment property. There's a lot of things that you can write off. All of the repairs are write-offs, also. So there's plenty of things. Get with a tax accountant. Mine is actually also a real estate agent, also a real estate investor, also
smart.
real estate. I mean, also a tax lawyer too. So
Wow.
he knows everything that can be deducted, and he deducts
I'm-
everything. It
I am
deducts
comfortable
part of
here.
the cell phone. It deducts part of the internet plan. So find one that's really, really good, and you can deduct a lot of things, including the property management fee.
Perfect. All right, Kalani, you're up. You can ask a question live.
Thank you, Basala and Bolanle. I know I've been sending messages, so I was like, let me stop peppering you guys and just
No, these are great questions. These are great questions.
and just ask you, like, first of all, I'm learning a ton, so thank you for making the time. A quick question around that, what we were just discussing. I think that's interesting when we're thinking about expanding our investment portfolio while also trying to like not take shortcuts, but like find loopholes. So for example, one I mentioned was stating it as a primary residence.
Mm-hmm.
So I can take advantage of a lower percentage to put down. But some of the things you just talked about, wouldn't that like kind of require that I state that as an investment property? And so is there a world in which they like come
Mm-hmm.
back for the other 15%? Like I'm just trying to figure out like when you make a decision to not state something as an investment property, but it is truly that, how you also can take advantage of like writing things off or writing off other expenses while doing so.
That makes sense, Bonnie. So she's saying if you're saying that this house is an investment property, can
Oh, it's
you?
not an investment property.
It is in like function, right? But on the front end, when I'm buying it, I want to take advantage of not having to put a lot down. So I'm saying it's going to
Right.
be
Primary.
a primary
You're saying
residence.
it's a primary residence. Okay,
Yes.
so if you're
Right.
saying it's a primary resident, will you be able to take advantage of all
Yes.
of?
So yeah, I did get that. Yeah, that's what I was thinking you were saying. So you can actually still use your primary residence as a investment property. So a lot of people that are doing Airbnb, they're renting out a room, they can claim that. So you are still allowed to
Mm-hmm.
rent out your primary, like if you're doing it on
Mm-hmm.
a full-time basis or you renovated the basement and you rent out the basement. So you can
Mm-hmm.
still get that tax benefit on a primary home because it's still a business, even if it's
Got
not
it.
investment business. Because yeah, people that are doing Airbnb, people that just have roommates. I mean, your roommate pays you, so it's technically, a business, but it's still your primary. And no, after you close, no one is gonna say you need to put more down. It's over. Like your down payment.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, at that point.
Okay. And then, Bolanle, can you talk a little bit? I learned this literally yesterday at brunch, the like Homestead Act and how to use that in recouping your like taxes for your property.
So it's a beautiful question.
It's a good one.
Unfortunately, I do know a little bit about it. I haven't actually had a chance to use it yet because I'm always moving. Always moving. But because I I usually don't get attached to homes. I'm like, okay, this one is appreciated in value. Let me sell it, use that money, and go buy another one. But with the homestead, if you plan to stay in your property for years, everyone you should be applying for that homestead. So what that does is like it freezes your taxes. So the taxes that you have right now, the property tax, because what's going to happen is like a lot of people when they purchase their home, they're fine with how much the property taxes cost. They've already budgeted all of that. By the next
Mhm.
year, especially with the pandemic and all that crazy buying, everybody's property taxes shot up because now the area is like worth more. So of course the local government wants to recoup some of that money. So they increase property taxes across the board. So now people that maybe can afford their home, especially like older people, I always feel bad for like older people that have already paid off their home, because you still have to pay taxes even if you've paid off your home. And now they have like this crazy amount of money that they have to pay each month for their taxes. So what the homestead does is it freezes your taxes when you purchased it, or whenever you apply, I guess. So whenever you apply for that homestead and you get approved, your taxes is frozen for the rest of the time that you live there. So if the value of the property increases and they're increasing property tax for everybody in your neighborhood, yours is frozen because you applied for homestead, because it's like, this is my home.
Yeah.
This is my home. There's no reason for me to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful, beautiful program. I believe my
just
parents
applied for mine as well. And I know in Texas, there was just a big thing where they increased the homestead from like 40,000 a write-off or to 100,000, something crazy like that. So it's going way up. So yeah, if you just got a home or you're buying a home and you're in that first year, definitely apply for homestead. It's very, very
as soon as possible. Yes.
yeah. And I think Marcon, do you have any other? I think there was one more question in the chat.
No, thank you both.
All right, thank you. So something I was actually going to ask you, and I think someone else put this in the chat, but because I know, like you said earlier, you've had situations where you're renting out, and then the people are horrible, squatting, don't want to pay rent. So how do you screen, renters for your investment properties to make sure that they're not damaging your property? You have the people that are going to pay on time because you're looking for that, you're looking to that income for something. So how do you screen renters now to get the right people?
So when I used to do my own selection, it definitely was like a huge learning curve, but you always want to make sure that they can afford at least 3 times the rent. If someone can barely afford that rent, it's not going to be worth it for you to rent to them, because at some point I have to make a decision, and your rent might be lower on their scale of like what needs to get paid. So usually 3 times the rent is the standard for if you're renting out $1,000 property, you need someone that's making at least 3 times that. Another thing that you want to look at is references. They have past landlords, you want to call them. I think that's the thing for me. It's like, I'm such an introvert. I'm like, I'm not calling up anybody. Like, I gotta talk to other landlord. I don't know what to ask them. But it's so big when you're screening to be able to talk to someone that's rented to this person before. And sometimes, like a lot of landlords, they might even lie because this person can be so terrible, they want to get them out. And they're like, oh, yeah, this person is perfect. You have to find ways to ask questions where you really, really get to like the meat of like, okay, does this person pay rent? How are they? Are they that tenant that brings over 25 people? I've seen that where like one person rents and then the whole family, like, and cousins and grandmas all move in. So and that's a big deal for you, because a lot of times in rentals, the landlord is the one paying like the utilities sometimes. So, and also neighbors are gonna get pissed if there's like a million cars in the street all the time, and they're making noise. So make sure that you're reaching out to past landlords if they have any. Make sure that the income is up to par. Credit also. Unfortunately, credit is a good indicator of whether or not someone is paying their bills. So you might want to say, okay, well, maybe they don't have good credits. Okay. It's usually not okay. And I hate to say that because a lot of times they are circumstances. So I would say have a little humanity also, but not too much, because you're still a business owner. Like treat it as a business. Always treat it as a business. Unless you want to run it as a nonprofit, a charity, by all means do so. The Lord will bless you, and so with the government if you register as a nonprofit. But it's a business, so you don't want to wear your heart too much on your sleeve in terms of that. Like, make the decision of like, this is what I require, and don't like veer away from it, because if you do, you might end up with someone that it's going to take you a headache to get out of the property.
Yeah. That is
so income, references, credit.
Yeah. All of that. No, but this has been so good. I know we're about to be at the top of the hour. So I'm sure everyone in this call has seen how much of a wealth of knowledge. I'm going to be following up with you on some stuff that I didn't even know. But how can people find you? I know you have a Calendly link that I'm going to share here in the chat, but is there any other way people can reach you? If they have just one-off questions they want to get your tax accountant or your lawyer or get a contact from you, how is the best way for people to reach out to you?
That will still be let me include my email. I won't be
email. Okay.
I'll go ahead and include my I'm always forgetting the ones. I have so many emails.
Right.
But there is one for my timeless rehabs, I believe. So I'll look for that and I'll put that in here.
Okay.
But you can reach out to me then. I do offer like a strategy session. It does cost money because, as you know, time is the time is the biggest. So it is $250. But if you mentioned that you came from AfroKlash, there's definitely going to be a discount for you. So just mention that if you do go on this Calendly and try to book through there. But if it's just like one of those one-off question, you can you know what? Let me do better. Send me a text message, okay? If this is gonna be like one of those one-off question, you can go ahead and just send me a text message. If it starts to get too much, I will send you that calendar.
Right.
So, but if you
I
just
was
want
gonna
to
say,
one
I
off,
don't know
you're
about
like, I'm not
texting.
paying that, but then by all means, because I completely understand what it's like to when you
Yes.
first get started. So I am a little more lenient. I'm like, you have to pay for my time. So if it's one off, just send me a text message. Text is
One off. If it's one off, it's a text. If you have a series of questions, you want to have a conversation, please go to the Calendly. And again, like you said, if you let her know that you're from AfroKlash, she can provide a discount for that. If you want to do a deeper dive, you to get all your questions answered. There's so much more you want to know because there is a lot involved in it. But so reach out to me there. But this has been so good. I've learned a lot that I came into this thing. I knew some things I didn't know. So I really, really, really appreciate your time. And for all of you that hopped on, we really appreciate you. Thank you so much. This was very, very,
Oh,
very
of course, of course. And just to mention like that, the 1 hour session is actually, if you want to like figure out the best strategy for you, because there's so many strategies now, right? There's house hacking, there's short-term rentals, there's people doing arbitrage too. Like, okay, that's crazy. There's so many things that you can do in real estate. If you wanted to like narrow down what your strategy should be it be medium-term rental? Should it be short-term rental? Should you just buy a house and rent out the rooms? Should you buy a 4-unit? Should you buy a duplex? We can talk about all of that in the strategy section. What should you be doing with your credit right now? How to get a contractor.
Yeah.
Builders. We didn't plug in quality builders.
Quality Builders. So Bolanle is the co-founder of her own real estate investment company called Quality Builders. So they help their contractors. Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yes. So we are actually we're contractors because what's gonna make or break you in real estate investment is your contractor. If you have a bad contractor, I lost $120,000. Well, even more, but on one project, I lost $120,000 because I had a bad contractor. So we know how much contractor is like, and people hate contractors, right? Because they're not reliable, old school. They never let you know, they're not transparent about what they're paying for. They don't answer their phone. They don't answer their phone. So we wanted to make sure people have wanted to give people the chance to have like a better experience with general contractors. So me and 2 other guys, they're actually engineers. We met from like we were working together at a startup, and then we started our own startup from there. And our goal, we're in Chicago, we're based in Chicago right now. So if you know anyone in Chicago, they need a contractor, please let us know. Put the website on there. And we're contractors, and with the contractor that we wish that we had when we started investing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And yeah, so that's the website. If you have anyone that's in Chicago looking to find a contractor in Chicago, you can reach out to them there. As always, for you all that have been here before, but if you're new, this conversation will be available on YouTube and Spotify before the end of the week. Yes, Kalani, yes, she is buying in Chicago.
What? Okay, yes.
She will be reaching out for sure.
Now, do you live in Chicago, or you're using the?
Let me see if she wants to. Let me see if she wants to. Do you want to come off mute, Kalani? Let me see if she's still here.
Yeah, because we also have like meetups that we host monthly.
Oh,
yeah, you can go
yes.
Okay, great. Yeah,
I'll shoot you a text. I'll shoot you a text.
Sounds good. But yes, we have a meetup where my other co-founder, because I actually live in Atlanta, he lives there, where he runs that meetup. And we have a virtual walkthrough also every month for those that are not in Chicago. So even our meetups are streamed online. But we also have a virtual walkthrough where we walk through a project that we're working on, and we walk people through the process, the permitting, where we are now, the problems we've encountered during that project, and what it looks like before, what it looks like now. So yeah, we have all of that.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I know it's Monday. It's everyone's probably busiest day of the week. So I really appreciate you all hopping on, making the time, asking so many incredible questions. But yeah, if you need this conversation later, it will be up on YouTube or Spotify. Thank you so much, Bolanle. I appreciate you as always. So much good information. I really, really thank you for your time and for being here with us today.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Bye. Have a good week.
Bye.